to the April 24th, 2018 meeting of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education. We are so happy to have a full auditorium. We will begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by an invocation. If you would please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Father, I thank you for this day, and thank you for all the blessings that we have received. Father, as we meet, give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and what is good. Lord, keep us from short-sightedness, and Lord, help us to proceed in all that we do with love, with grace, with peace, and with harmony. Help us, Lord, to make good decisions, or decisions that are for the good of all, and that guard us from blind self-interest. And Father, grant us always the humility to seek your will in all that we do and say. Amen. You may be seated. Board members, we have a few things that have come up that will change our agenda. One, we need to remove from our special recognitions this evening the recognition of our national board certified recipients, our teachers. I believe we will reschedule that till August. Great recognition to start the new school year. And in light of discussions that we had earlier in committee meetings, I would like to add to the discussion item the discussion of adding a possible meeting on May the 1st of the Board of Education. So we will add that to this discussion items and also action. I don't believe we have any other changes. So with that being said, do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda? Thank you, Vice Chairman Barr, and second, Ms. Taylor. All in favor? Thank you very much. So I believe we had some models earlier tonight with our new T-shirts, but at this time I would like to recognize David Daggett, Mr. Schuler, as we talk about our Safe Prom, Sober Prom T-shirt and our winner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, School Board, Dr. Emery, educators, family, and friends. This is the 28th year of the Safe Sober Prom Night program. I know I don't look like I've been around that long, but 28 years. We're in 50 high schools in 10 counties all across the Triad. It's the largest and longest running privately funded initiative of its type in the United States. More than 500,000 total students have taken the pledge over those years. And a huge part of the program is the T-shirt design contest, because the entire program is based on the concept of positive peer pressure. We all know how difficult negative peer pressure is. If we can turn that into a positive, it can spread very rapidly. 28 years ago, when I tried to sign students up to take the pledge, I actually had to grab their hand and make them write. They would take the T-shirt, stuff it into their jacket or their book bag because it wasn't a cool thing to do. Now, last week we were at West High School. When the bell rang, Mr. McInich, we told our volunteers stand back because there's a stampede of students. A lot of them put the shirts on right there, take pictures, send it to their friends. It's a very positive effect. This year, our T-shirt design contest winner is Megan Brown. She's a senior at West Forsyth High School. We bombed her classroom with lots of dignitaries, including the mayor of Winston-Salem, the police chief, representatives from the Greensboro and Winston-Salem Fire Department, lots of police officers. We had the principals from 2 schools because she's a student at West Forsyth, but designed this in art class at the Career Center. So we had Dr. Nichols from the Career Center. Mr. McInich also came over and joined us for the day. And for those of you who don't realize the importance of your home school following you around and being there means an awful lot to the students and to the community. Thank you, Mr. McInich. Lots of community dignitaries from the school board. Ms. Calvert-Hayes was there to represent the school board, and we had a room filled when we made the surprise presentation. The frame t-shirt is the first one off the line. Unfortunately, Megan gets to see that a lot of times. She doesn't officially get to receive it until Mr. Schuler, Mr. McInich, and I present it to her on May 22nd at the West Forsyth Awards ceremony. Part of the design contest is on the back of the shirt. There's approximately 15,000 have been printed already. Megan's name is on the back, recognizing both her schools, which are West Forsyth and the Career Center. And so she is a popular person. She has so far been on ABC News, Fox News, in front of the school board, and we probably have several more presentations coming with her. So it's been a very exciting time this spring. I encourage you all. I'm the only person, I think, in existence who's been in every school every single year for more than 20 years. I've been in every single school for 28 straight years, and I can tell you the students we have today are the best and the brightest. They're very talented. What they need from all of us is ongoing leadership, guidance, and direction. And Megan's teacher is somebody who does that every day. Ms. Stephanie Messer, if you would come up. This is her art teacher. And what's significant about that is we get hundreds of entries in the t-shirt design contest from all across the triad. The winner has now come out of Ms. Messer's classroom 9 straight years. So she's fabulous. Megan is, all of our representatives have been fabulous. She's exceptional. Just last week, she came in first place in the state of North Carolina in the Skills USA contest, and she will be representing North Carolina, the only representative of North Carolina, in the national championship for Skills USA. That's in...
Just for ad design.
For ad design. Yeah, no, for ad design, which is, you know, what she did to sell Safe Store Prom Night t-shirts to her students. And she will be going to the national championship in June, representing the state of North Carolina. We are very proud of her, and we're very proud of Ms. Messer, and we appreciate your ongoing encouragement and support. The ongoing encouragement and support of our young people is absolutely essential to guarantee the security and the stability of our communities in the future, and you all are part of that. Thank you.
We'll just give you a certificate. Elizabeth wants to shake some hands tonight. So Megan, thank you. Good luck as you represent the state. That's awesome. And great T-shirt that we will all show off and wear in Winston-Salem. Thank you again for your 28 years of support for our schools and for our students. We really appreciate that, and getting that positive message out. It's priceless. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will shake hands. Freeze up if it's been sitting for a while.
There we go.
Madam Chairman, School Board, Dr. Emery, and special guest, good evening. We are about to recognize our 2018 Scholastic Arts Award winners. But before we do that, I'd like to share some facts about our winnings this year. There were 147 schools represented in our Scholastic region with 3,300 total entries in this year's competition. We were awarded 132 Gold Key, Silver Key, and Honorable Mention awards. We were awarded 33 Gold Key Awards, making up 10% of those awarded in our 62 county region. We also were awarded 2 National Gold Medals and 1 National Silver Medal. Our students were also awarded 28 Silver Key Awards and 71 Honorable Mention Awards. We will begin with the middle school awardees. Jillian Prutianu from Clemens Middle School. Just stop right there, right here. There you go. Thank you. Her teacher is Catherine Howard. Catherine. And her parents, if you will please stand. Thank you. Alexis Elliott from Haynes Magnet Middle School. Her teacher is Barbara Buttrin. And Alexis family, if you'll please stand if you're here. Also at Haynes Magnet Middle is Allison Setliff. She's unable to be here this evening. Megan McDonald from Meadowlark Middle School. Her teacher is Elizabeth Miller. And this is actually a weaving. Paige Warren from Philo Hill Magnet Academy. And her teacher, Linda Rubin, is here this evening. Morgan Ketchum from Thomas Jefferson Middle School, and her teacher is Allison Pegram. And now our high school awardees. Catherine McManus from Atkins Academic Technical High School, and her teacher Janet Blakely is here this evening. Emmy Ross from Reynolds High School. Her teacher is Phil Beninati. And if her family is here, would you please stand? Ella Moorhead from R.J. Reynolds High School. Her teacher is also Phil Beninati. And if her family is here, would you please stand? Tatum Ward from R.J. Reynolds High School. Her teacher is Phil Beninati. And if her family is here, would you please stand? Elizabeth Ampolini from R.J. Reynolds High School. Her teacher is Ashley Hurst, if he will please stand. And parents? If you'll notice, she has quite a bit of artwork on her page, and I'll go ahead and continue because there's more. This is actually a portfolio. She had a gold key with one of her pieces as well as the entire portfolio. Anna Hart from R.J. Reynolds High School. Her teacher is Kenneth Mulvey. And R.A. Puentes from R.J. Reynolds High School. Her teacher is Kenneth Mulwig. Arwen Baker from R.J. Reynolds High School. His teacher is Kenneth Mulwig. And Arwen's parents, if you'll please stand. Tiandre Chappelle is from Reagan High School. His teacher is Jennifer Willard. Jennifer, I know you're here. And if Tiandre's parents are here, if you'll please stand. Okay. Ioana Angelescu is from Reagan High School, and her teacher is also Jennifer Willard. And Ioana, if your parents are here, will you please stand? Danitza Cisneros is also from Reagan High School, and her teacher is Jennifer Willard. And Danitza's parents, if you please stand. Thank you. Leopoldo Amodia from West Forsyth High School. His teacher is Elizabeth Betson. And if your family will please stand. Amanda Hoffman from West Forsyth High School. Her teacher is Elizabeth Betson, and she is a national gold medalist. Now here's the fun part. This is also Amanda Hoffman's artwork, but this teacher is Nathan Newsom. Nathan? Sarah Frisbee from West Forsyth High School. Her teacher is Elizabeth Betson, and she is a national silver medalist. She also has an entry with her teacher, Nathan Newsom. Sarah, if your family will please stand. There we go. Hannah Kennedy from West Forsyth High School. Her teacher is Nathan Newsom. She received a gold key for the artwork with the sunflower as well as her portfolio. So the next slides also belong to her. There are 8 pieces in her works. And I think they've been having a lot of fun with those pieces. Matt Barnhart is from West Forsyth High School. His teacher is Nathan Newsom. Samantha Graham is from West Forsyth High School. Her teacher is Nathan Newsom. She also received a gold key for this individual piece that has the color, as well as her portfolio. She has 8 pieces as well. Jesse Cochran is from West Forsyth High School. His teacher is Nathan Newsom, and he is a national gold medalist. Leo Ballard is from West Forsyth High School. His teacher is Elizabeth Betson, and if Leo's family would please stand. Emma Berger is from West Forsyth High School. Her teacher is Nathan Newsom. And if Emma's family would please stand. Heather Sigmund is from West Forsyth High School. Her teacher is Nathan Newsom. And if Heather's family would please stand. Congratulations to our regional Scholastic Gold Key winners and national awardees. Jillian, if you'll turn around and start shaking hands. I noticed that the agenda was not the same order as the goals list that I sent in, so I know this is what we're doing. It's okay, they're just.
So that concludes our special recognitions this evening. We will next move into public comments on agenda items. We have several folks signed up to address the board. We will put a timer up for 3 minutes. And so if you will try to stay within those 3 minutes and to just, if the timer goes off, just finish your sentence or your thought and then we will move on. So first up to speak this evening is Rhonda Mays.
Good evening, Chairwoman Jones, the board, and Dr. Emery. I'm Rhonda Mays, a school social worker in this district, serving as full-time release president of Forsyth County Association of Educators. Tonight, I would like to speak on the issue of school safety at election time. But let's look at school safety at any time. It's important that our schools are safe, not only in the physical sense, but that school safety is looked at as something that we're doing both in emotional sense for our students and all educators in our building, not just in the physical. It is important that in order for us to address school safety, we first have to make certain that everyone understands that it's all of our jobs. It's not just the SRO, it's not just administration, it's all of our jobs to keep the schools safe and everyone in the school safe. So we can start that by having relationships and communication. And I'm glad to see that we are at the place where we are having that communication so we can discuss how we can keep all of our students and all of our educators and our buildings safe, no matter if they're located in a school or one of our other sites throughout the district. It is important that our students and educators feel safe in our school. So please continue to work on this issue and continue to make certain that we don't make it a political issue. It is a nonpartisan issue. It is an issue about humanity. It is important that we remain safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Bohannon.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Emery. My name is Alex Bohannon. I am a 2012 graduate of Parkland Magnet High School and a current candidate for Winston-Salem Forsyth County School Board in District 1. Being present for the Mid-Atlantic report during the Building and Grounds Committee meeting today, and upon hearing the conversation and the questions asked, I'd like to remind you and encourage you to keep perception as well as reality at the forefront of your minds in future conversations and deliberations regarding the Ashley Academy. Every decision you make will shape the public's perception and the community's perception about the quality and the depth of care you have for our students, particularly our most vulnerable. If fidelity to freedom of democracy is the code of our civic religion, then surely the code of our humanity is faithful service to that unwritten commandment that says that we shall give our children better than we ourselves received. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Commissioner Elmy.
Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Emery, I'll try to make it 2 minutes. I was graduated in 1970 from the Forsyth County School System. I feel a little age right about now. But you know, I have 5 grown kids and 10 grandkids. I'm a young grandfather. And I read 80% of the report. And I noticed they've used the word mold about 20 times. This is my concern. As the young gentleman just said, Mr. Bohannon, perception is reality for most people. It's rooted on an emotional reaction, long before we read the facts. That's our first sensory response to things. And so, if one teacher or one student, in my humble perspective, has this perception that mold causes her illness, that's a serious issue that we should all take to heart. We need a serious urgency for a follow-up plan. A 1, 2, 3, what are we going to do to address this perception? I know the character of the school system. I came out of it. 3 of my grown kids they have all kind of advanced degrees now, doctorates, et cetera. They graduated from Carver, the great Carver Nation School. So I know the value system in the school system is phenomenal. I also know the problems we have. Ashley's a problem. I would address you with this simple request. When you look at that recommendation number 2 in this report, and it says, and I quote, watch for and report mold growth on books, furniture, and other surfaces, as well as recurrent mold odors indoors. They're charging the teachers and staff to do that at Ashley. That to me is an issue. So I hope you take to heart the serious perception issue. The community is watching this very closely. As a young grandfather, I'm watching it too. I got 10 grandkids. So do your best to deliberate and make the best decision for those children at Ashley with haste and urgency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So board, that concludes our speakers signed up for public comments on agenda items. And we will move into our discussion items. First up, we'll recognize Jonathan Wilson as we have some discussions around school safety at election sites.
Got a short technical difficulty.
Okay. Sorry. Board members, I believe if you want to pull up the presentation, we have it. It's not embedded in the agenda, but you can go to our home landing site on Haiku and find it there.
Good evening, Chair Jones, Dr. Emery, Board. So I guess you guys are aware that we're having a primary election in a few weeks. So we want to take just a few minutes to talk to you a little bit about our response to elections and how it affects our school system when that goes on. So just to start with, North Carolina General Statute specifically designates the Board of Elections the authority to conduct elections, obviously in our county, and provides that they make a suitable structure for voting. Our local Board of Election also by law is entitled to demand any use of our schools or any other building that may receive taxpayer money. And so I thought that was I'd never seen that wording before, but they use the word demand. Basically tells us that we really don't have an option but to comply with this law. The law actually states, it's North Carolina General Statute 163A 1046, and this is the wording that the County Board of Elections shall be entitled to demand use of any school or the state, county, municipal building or part thereof for the purpose of conducting registration or elections. And also within that, I think we also have to provide parking for those elections. The requirements for the precincts are, number one, that they have to be handicapped accessible, that they have to have room to accommodate the voters that would show up to vote in those precincts, and have adequate power. We had a question whether they had to have Wi-Fi access, and I was told yesterday that they do not, but also that they have to have parking so that elderly folks or people that may be disabled don't have to walk a long distance to get to the polls. It's with this discussion, with the focus that we've had on safety and security over the last few months, my question is, can we do something else? Based on what we just said with the wording of the law, that's not possible. And it's also unlikely that the Board of Election would stop using schools. And the reason is because they are centrally located throughout the county. They are all ADA accessible, and they all have sufficient parking. Many churches and organizations that also could allow for voting sometimes tend to shy away and not open up their doors. Again, the primary will be on May the 8th. Of the 101 county precincts, 34 of those are located within the Winston-Salem Forsyth County school system. 19 of those are in elementary schools, 7 are in our middle schools, 7 in high schools, and 1 being another property, that being the old Haynes-Lawrence building that's now vacant. This is not a new issue. In 2013 and 2014, there was an extensive study that was done by the school attorneys, staff members from the operations department, and also members of the Board of Elections, where they actually went around and visited these same poll sites, or maybe different ones at the time, but each one was visited. Some concerns were addressed. I think that they asked that some polls be moved from our schools to another location in places where it was feasible. That happened. There were other places that we asked to be moved from within one spot in the school to another place that was more conducive to be less disruptive to the learning environment, and those changes were made at that time as well. But since April the 17th, last week, I personally visited all 34 polling sites. I've met with administrators of those schools. I've followed the voter routes that they may take. We've looked at any new safety concerns or old safety concerns again, and sought other locations within the school. There were very few changes that we could make. There were some suggestions, and I think that when I'll talk about those shortly, that we can make some changes. Also, yesterday I met with a director of elections, Mr. Tim Sue, for the county. I shared all of our concerns that we had as far as opening up the schools to voters. We've asked that he reiterate to all his poll workers that they must wear their ID badges, something official that they have that readily identifies them. We're all wearing ours. Parents that come in and sign in, they're also wearing their ID. So we're going to ask that election officials are properly identified at all times. And I asked them for them to be respectful and understand that we have a heightened sense of security since February the 14th. And that we've asked that they also, we're going to do it as well, but ask them to provide ample signage and some direction so that people know which direction to go. So when looking at concerns, there's actually two things that concern me. One is the sequestration of the location. What is the level of interaction that students may have with voters that they could they come in contact with? What is the location of that polling site within the school in relation to classrooms, student restrooms, and common areas such as cafeterias and places that students may congregate? The greatest fear that we have is the potential that voters could wander. Not intentionally maybe, but they could wander down the hall and have direct unsupervised contact with students. I'll say this, we're not aware that this ever happened. It's possible, but we don't have any documentation to say that that's happened in the past. Yes,
Could you clarify that that's not just in our district, but anywhere?
Okay, so I can tell you from our district, I think when Dion had done her study back in 2013 and 14, maybe she can shed a little more light. But
anywhere in the United States, it was not just here, it was anywhere.
You mean as far as the building's demand the use of school?
No,
the fact that we never
the
had any
fact that
contact.
there had never been a problem at a polling site in a school, not only in our district, but in the state and in the country. Because I think we did a very extensive search.
If I recall correctly, there weren't any reported incidents of any students being harmed or anything like that from people who had shown up to vote.
Anywhere in the country.
Yes, I
Yes.
believe that is correct.
Thank you.
So also, as far as the sequestration is concerned, most schools, as you know, voting occurs in gymnasiums, it occurs in media centers, it occurs in auditoriums. In some of those schools, those locations are in the middle of the school. Some of them, they have exterior entrances, so it makes it much easier. So just a couple examples, Forest Park Elementary School and Union Cross, it's almost impossible to sequester that voting place because they do it within the school. Any space that we choose in that school is going to be in the belly or the heart of the school. It requires that somebody come into the front door or into another door that we choose to use, and they have to have a direct route to that voter location. Two examples of a sequestered location would be Louisville, where they have a gym that's attached to the school, but there is an exterior door, and Sedge Garden Elementary School, which has a gym that is freestanding. It's the old gym on the property. Other concerns are security risks, classrooms. In our elementary schools, classroom doors remain locked. So we don't have to be concerned about somebody walking down the hall and walking into a classroom. Those classroom doors are locked. That doesn't mean that they're not open from time to time for people coming and going, but they remain locked throughout the day. Middle schools and high schools are a little bit different in that they have children that are changing classes more often. Cafeterias, in a few schools, I'm thinking that there's a possibility that voters would have to walk past the cafeteria. We can take steps to make sure that those doors are secured. And principals, let me just say this, principals, most of them went through at least one voting cycle in the past and are familiar with how it works. Hallways, most of the time elementary schools have students that are escorted. There may be times when a student may be called to class. I think they sometimes send in pairs to get to where they need to go, but they're usually always supervised. Again, in middle and high schools, that is less likely to happen. And restrooms, sometimes these restrooms are near the voting site, but there's no provision within the law that I can see that says that we have to provide for restrooms. Obviously, for poll workers who are there throughout the day, they'll have to have a place to go. And then the final concern is traffic. As you know, if you visit any school, and I know you have, traffic's always a problem at the beginning and end of school. This voting is going to add to that to create some delays, harder to manage traffic flow when people are new on campus. They may not know which way to go. And then obviously we have students walking through parking lots and election officials also standing near where cars are. But again, we're not aware of any major incidents that have happened in the past. So based on what I've seen in the past couple weeks walking around and looking back in my discussions with principals and the director of the voting director. I lost my train of thought. The conclusions and recommendations that we have is to move any poll site to a better location on our campuses, such as moving it from a media center to a gymnasium outside. I can give you an example. Rural Hall, they're currently voting. They were currently slated to vote inside the new gym, which is in the center of the school. We're asking that that polling place be moved to the outside to the old gym. It now has a new handicap accessible ramp, so I think that it's adequate to be used. And Tim Sue yesterday said that he was open to those possibilities of looking at some new places within the school. That we want to route our voters in the most direct path to the polling site. So if I walk through those doors to where it goes, there's some things that we can do along those paths to keep people from wandering around in the school. Ensure adequate signage. Again, I said that we could do that as well. Principals are going to do that, but also the election officials will also help us to develop some signage as to which entrance voters may use and where voters are not allowed. Again, poll workers are asked to wear their identification at all times. Stanchions, it's basically it's a stanchion type. Even if it's something as simple as putting cones with a broom to stick up through it with some rope with a sign that says no voters beyond this point or no public access beyond this point, we can do that just past the doors of where someone may enter into the voting site. That doesn't necessarily prevent someone from going around it, but it definitely would make it less inviting for somebody to walk around. So those are type things that we want to do. Reroute students possibly to minimize any direct or unsupervised contact. It's possible that when students are going to the lunchroom, if they have to walk past where the voters are, that they take an alternate route. Raise staff awareness throughout that day just to be aware that there is voting going on campus. And increase our staff presence throughout the day around those voting areas. Finally, I've heard from a couple schools that have sought PTA volunteers to come and sit in the hall. And some schools, I think, have done that, and I offered that suggestion to some other schools. I think that they may try to do that as well. I'm sure parents would also want to help out. Reserve parking spaces for voters as opposed to them trying to park in places. We really want to discourage parking on bus lots. It's going to create a problem later in the day when the buses show up. Consider alternative arrival and dismissal locations if it's feasible. I don't know that it necessarily is, but in some cases it may. And then also for future elections, we're going to recommend that the Board of Election budget for and provide security in places that we need. That's obviously something that they need to budget for, but we're going to ask that they do that. That's basically what I have for you. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Jonathan, so these are listed as conclusions and recommendations. Are these recommendations from the district going to schools, or are these next steps? Do we have things in place? Each school is different and their needs may be different, but do we actually have steps to ensure kind of what we gave this kind of big, in my like 30,000 view of what would be recommendations, but do we have steps, and as a district are we providing that support to the schools? Are you leaving that up to a school? So
as I walked around for the past 2 weeks, then these things that I mentioned, the principals and the administrators that I spoke with, these are some of the things that they came up with as well. So these are some steps that are already in place. I think that I just finished this up yesterday, so I think that we're going to come back and give them some guidelines and say these are the expectations that I think that we have. As far as the signage, I think there's even a school that called me as recently as this afternoon that wants to change the location within their school. So I've got to get in touch with, or the principal there has to get in touch with Mr. Sue to make sure that that is suitable with his folks. So to answer your question, yes, some of these are already going to be in place, and some of them will be pushed out.
so some of the changes maybe for the locations, but we've put in place, so parents' concerns for that day, for their students, and especially so many of our schools that are impacted are elementary schools. So what I'm hearing is these are not just recommendations that you're making to school sites, but they are actual steps of action that they're going to put in place on May the 8th.
Yes, ma'am. So for example, I'll just give you a school, Clemens Elementary School. To get to their media center, you would have to go into the school typically and walk down the hall. However, there's an exterior door. We're going to mandate that exterior door be used as long as it's ADA accessible. There are a couple places that we suggested to use a side door on the school, but there's a lip maybe this high, so that obviously somebody in a wheelchair couldn't get in there without going still through the school. So any place that there is an exterior door that goes into the voting location, that will be used. And surprisingly, most of our elementary schools have that exterior door into some of those places.
Jonathan, what type protection are we getting from our police force? I know we have police that are at our schools a lot, or from the sheriff department on election day. Where do we stand with those two departments?
So I've spoken to the police department and the sheriff's department and the Kernersville Police Department. Their plan is to do nothing different on those days than they typically already do. Obviously, in our middle schools and high schools, we have the SROs that will be there. They will be asked to make, to pay closer attention to the visitors on campus. Quite honestly, the police department and the sheriff's department would probably, I don't want to speak for them, but they are shorthanded as well. I've asked, just like we have with our new program to have officers come to campus and eat lunch for free. I've asked them to eat lunch that day at elementary schools. So we're doing the things that we can to encourage them to come to campus. I feel like that they will pay closer attention on those days. But obviously, if something, an emergency that takes them away from that, then it's hard for me to mandate that they're there without a contract.
So how many SRO officers do we have that would be at our schools?
Well, each of our SRO officers right now are assigned to a school, so our middles and high schools are all covered. So I'm not, obviously we're not as concerned about middles and highs as on any given day. Elementary schools have always been the challenge. But I do think that, I'm going to do my best to strongly encourage them to be there if they can, and they're good partners, and they will. But I think that our folks have to be, our awareness has to be up. Election officials, this is really their thing. They really need to step up and help us as well. Their folks need to be aware of if somebody's coming in, that they direct them to the right place and make sure that they go out the way that they should go out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions for Jonathan?
Jonathan, obviously the Board of Elections has a difficult task, making sure that we have enough polling sites available. Have we had much conversation with them about actually using other municipal sites as opposed to putting so much of the burden on the schools to provide those sites?
Well, I have.
That was the reason for the extensive study a few years ago and recommendations we were asked at that time. We tried to get the all moved from there, and it was that some were moved, but not all. So.
I would just like to also make a comment that voting is one of our constitutional rights, and it is important that our children see that voting is something that we as a district support. Schools, as well as voting, is paid for by taxpayer dollars. There has never been an incident of a child being harmed in a school. One of my own feelings is we ask this community to build new schools, to support schools, to have a local supplement that helps our school district, and that I would hate for us to think about voters, citizens coming in to to vote for the people they want representing them being seen as somehow dangerous to our children. We want to create safe places for them. We want to protect our kids, but we also want to expose them to part of the responsibility of full citizenship, and voting is indeed one of those things.
Other comments, board members, or questions of Jonathan at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will switch gears and talk a little around finance and the budget as our CFO comes forward to talk over our some changes in the finance department.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Jones, Dr. Emery, members of the board. I hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. I'm here to discuss some of the changes in the finance department. This doesn't include all of them, but it is some of the main ones. Of course, one of the largest ones is the budget amendment and transfer request. The form has been revised that we were using. I'm not going to read all of these out to you. What I would like to say is before we send them to the Finance Committee for review, they've been checked by about 6 people now. Once you all approve those, then we're entering them into the system as a budget amendment and transfer. And then we are going back to the person who requested that and letting them know that it's approved.
Kim, just so the paper copies we have, does that match what was already been loaded? It's the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure everybody had copies in case
Thank
they
you.
needed them. And I am going to let you know that all of the budget amendments and transfers are following this now. So those are in effect now.
Actually, I'm sorry, Mark, the document that she's using is actually in your haiku. The paper documents are part of the budget discussion which comes next.
But they're new. These are new. We don't have these.
Yes, ma'am, you do in your haiku.
In the haiku, same thing. Okay.
Same thing. Everything that you're going to see tonight is in haiku.
They also have a paper copy of this. It's just not in presentation form. I did give them that too. We also are sending anything back that has not been approved. If someone sends something down for processing and it does not have the proper signatures, it's going back to them. One of the other things that we're doing is, of course, as you all have seen, the budget amendment and transfer packet that you're receiving is a little clearer and easier to understand, and I'd like to thank all of you for your input on that. It's been great. If there's anything else you'd like to see added or deleted, we can still work on that. It's a work in progress. Our purchase orders that are over $100,000, they are now only being released by appropriate staff that I have designated, which is right now myself, our purchasing director, and budgeting. We don't want those just being released by anybody because of all the steps and procedures we're taking to ensure. Contracts that are being sent down to me from legal, I am looking into system to make sure that there are funds available for those contracts. Once I approve them, we are sending them to the purchasing department or to the designated assignee, and they are entering in that day. So that way we're encumbering the funds the minute we get those contracts, which has been a very helpful process in helping us know what we've got outstanding. Any purchases made with a P card, we are issuing a purchase order for those also to encumber those funds. And we've also made some changes in staffing and who is handling what in our department, so we're utilizing the people we have a little better. In operations, I would like to say thank you. They actually developed a form that we are actually using for any money that is coming to us to be deposited. And I also want to say publicly, thank you to operations. Everything that we're changing, we go to them first and ask them, okay, if we do this, what's going to happen? Because they are one of our largest users in the system, and they have been very gracious to help us with this. So I want to say thank you to operations. The purchase order checklist. We've actually developed this. Anytime that a purchase order is being issued, we are asking for this checklist to be attached to it. And on that checklist, we are asking for signatures. We want to know if proper approvals have been attained, if the item is included in the current budget. Is there funding in the current budget? We also want to know if needed, has a budget amendment and transfer been done? If not, then it goes back to the budget amendment and transfer process. And also, if needed, has the bid process been followed? And like I said, this is new and it was implemented April 1st also. In the budgeting process, working through it this year, there's some things that I do know that needs to be changed. One of those being that we'd like to develop a new format where everyone is coming to present their budget in the same format. We'd like to include at least 2 years prior history plus this year's expenditures and budgets. So I think it'll be a little easier to follow in this process. After the budget is complete and approved, myself and my staff will be going out to work with our budget managers to let them know what has been approved in their budget and help them manage a little bit and tell them what to expect and, you know, work with them on their funds. In our 18-19 budget process, we did request that budgets kind of be reflective of what the true cost is to try to cut down on our transfers that we're doing every month. So we're hoping that that will help some once the budget process is complete. So that are just a few of the things that we're doing. There's many, many more. But does anybody have any questions on any of that?
Questions, board, for Kim?
Yes.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
I think well now, I think you're still up.
I'm still up.
So have a budget update.
Correct. As many of you know, on April the 3rd, when we did our presentation, we were asked to go back and look at the budget in more detail. On April 3rd, we were showing total increases of about $3.5 million in our budget, but we were also showing a decrease based on state allotments of about $1.7 million. We did go back. We had all of our budget managers, departments look at their budgets and see where we could possibly cut some more funds. In total, we were able to cut about $357,000 more out of the budget. Many of the departments, which you do have a copy of, was able to cut that out of their current budget. And we also, in our county appropriations, we are expecting $1.5 million more based upon the formula that we were given. So all of that being said, our net balance as of today is that we're showing still a deficit of about $16,600. However, when the budget was presented, we did not have projected increases for salaries. So we went ahead and we did a projection based on about 2% and what we think that would be. And based on that, that would be about $1.4 million in additional funds that we would need to discuss if the raise would come through.
And Kim, remind us when we're saying that, that's if the state gives a raise.
Right, if the state gives a raise of 2%, then we would have to locally match.
Right. And so since we don't know that exact number.
Right, it's kind of hard for us to project, but we did want to project something just so we weren't coming back and with no funds in there.
Okay.
So does anybody have any questions? I know it's a brief update and it's preliminary numbers.
Ms. Parker?
The enhancement teacher state allotment, that comes out of individual schools. Is that correct? Different?
So that is, last year when the class size legislation went into effect, we did not get new state allotment to do that. And we used local dollars to add those teaching positions, Ms. Parker. With House Bill 90, the state is now helping us with the funding. And so that 1.7 is the amount that's coming from the state, and we can offset our local contribution by, so that's how we count that as revenue. The state will pick up those teaching positions, so it frees up that local amount that we currently are spending in teaching positions.
And when you said that these departments reduced their budget, most all of that came out of monies that's being used in central office, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, now that doesn't affect any classrooms or school money or any of that, correct? Okay.
The one area that, and we're working hard on that, So when you looked at this the first time, there was also a line item in here of 1.7 that where we're losing flexibility in the gifted teacher and the state textbook fund. And one of the things we've spent the last 2 weeks working on is how to make that work. So in the past, the state has allowed us to move in and out of those funds in ways that benefited the district. And so we have a couple of options that we think help us there. And so those reductions you see here, part of the reason we got to just a $16,000 deficit was looking at how we could better utilize that. And so I want you to be clear that these other reductions, yes, are largely people looking at their departments over time and saying, based on what we budgeted versus what we actually spent, we believe we have a cushion here. We can be satisfied that we can, if we have an emergency, we'll come back to the board with. The gifted teacher allotment, working hard to be sure that where we have self-contained classrooms, we use the state allotment for those. That will help that. We also were transferring money from the state textbook allotment into local. And so good conversations going on with Dr. Nail and her department about how we can use the state dollars in the state account, if that makes sense, and still try to meet the needs of the district. We also have always, this board has always had $500,000 in local textbook, and we've looked at what we've purchased there, and we think we may actually even have some surplus in those materials. So it may allow us to free up some of the local dollars for some of these other needs. So what I mean by that, science kit consumables, things that the state doesn't put on that state adopted textbook list that are still important classroom supplies. So our goal is not to reduce that, but to make sure we have it in other places so that our local budget doesn't have to pick up the difference. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Well, and I'd just like to commend the departments. I know that they've all gone back in the past few weeks and re-looked at their budgets, and I appreciate them being very frugal, is also trusting us that if they do need the additional funds by being frugal, that they'll come back. So I thank you to those departments for doing that.
Additional comments, board members, or questions about I think I have, so where we are, this was an update, but it seems like there's still really a work in progress. I know we've added some conversation about another meeting, and I'm assuming this may be something that we could revisit or at least have another update at that time as well.
So yes, ma'am, and if you do, I mean, if you call a special meeting, which I know there was some conversation about having a meeting for other reasons, we would definitely want the budget item to be here. We're scheduled to go before the commissioners on the 10th of May. And so your final approval, obviously, always this is a budget you're going to have to revisit. We don't know what the state is going to do. My biggest request for feedback from you would be when I present this to the commissioners on May 10th, what my goal is that we'll go back and find this 16.6. So we present one version that's completely balanced, but then I would also like to be sure they see that the unknown of what the state raise does could put us in a challenging position based on the revenue. The county manager also says we will have updates on the county revenue before we go on the 10th. So I'm also optimistic that will look better? I hope so. But I don't want to misrepresent how you would like that presented to the commissioners, I guess I'm saying. So do we build it in and just show that we have a deficit, or do we share it sort of like we have with you, where we say, you know, we've made some reductions to be able to balance the budget, but that does not account for what the unknown will be with what the state does?
Yes, and so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the.
Yeah,
in
if you
the
give
meeting,
me,
we can-
that would be really helpful feedback.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Emery. And thank you, Kim. So this time, I'd like to recognize Darrell Walker. Earlier this evening, at our Building and Grounds Committee meeting, we heard with a work group from Ashley and members of the community, a report from Mid-Atlantic on Ashley Academy. I believe we're going to have that same report and findings tonight as well. And I do believe that the report has been electronically loaded onto our website under the quick links that's on the left-hand side. So for anyone who wants to look at that.
Great.
Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Dr. Emery Board. I want to give you go back just a little bit and give you some historical information before Will comes up and presents his report, because I think it's important as we talked about transparency and working together as a team where we sort of are in the process. As you may recall, we did have sort of our first concern going back around August, September timeline of this school year. Once we had that identified that, you may recall we asked you about bringing Trinity Environmental in to do an assessment, the first round of assessments. We did that, got a report back February 26th, in which that time we met with the school staff. And then there was some questions that came up out of that meeting that led us to say, well, let's get another set of eyes. Let's take a look at some things in a different context. And also, hence out of that came the work group that we've called the work group. That was our individuals, about 10 people from the school, as well as some of our staff, operations staff. We have met 3 times officially. We met the first time on March 6th. We did have sign-in sheets and kept minutes of all of our meetings to sort of keep us and hold us accountable for our discussions in those meetings. At that point in time, we shared all of our past work orders with the school and with the staff, kind of something they kind of asked about. We also, at that time, kind of introduced Greg and Will to the staff, allowed them to have some dialogue, actually walk the building without school staff, just let them build their relationship and have conversations so that they can make understand their concerns as they did their assessment. We met again, well, let me back up. So we did that on March 13th. Well, when they came back from the meeting, we basically asked the staff, are you comfortable with the relationship with Mid-Atlantic to move forward in this process? It was sort of a unanimous approval from the work group to move forward. So Mid-Atlantic created a scope of work in this evaluation. On March 13th, Mr. Laughlin sent an email to the staff with a copy of the contract that was approved and the scope of work to the work team so that they could evaluate, to let them see that, and then to let them know that the work would begin the following day on the 14th. We came back and met on March 20th, was our sort of second official meeting. Mid-Atlantic came back on the 22nd, also to check some main boilers and kind of complete the whole scope of work at that point in time. We pushed our next meeting back because our goal was to meet the third Tuesday since we had second, fourth with board stuff. We can push the third meeting back because the spring break was right there, hit right during the spring break period, to April 17th. And then that meeting was just sort of a preparation discussion for today. So with that being said, I wanted to let you know there is a little history there as we met with our work team, work group, and the support. And I want to thank that work group publicly. And I'm not sure if any of them are here. If you are, raise your hand. I know Ms. Linville is here, and then Ms. Dr. Roseborough in the back. But I want to thank them because they spent a lot of their time after school, after a long day, working with us, having a conversation. We had good, challenging conversation. That's okay, and that's part of building the relationship. So I wanted to give you that history, and if there are no other questions from me, I will then turn it over to Mr. Service to present the report. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Emery, and gathered guests, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of Mid-Atlantic Associates and Greg Eisenhower. Our report has been issued tonight, and I hope that the report pretty much speaks for itself and will answer a lot of the questions that folks have about the work we've done at the school and what we've found at the school. But let me just very briefly go over the scope of work that we did at the school. Very briefly summarize the report by going over the scope of work we did, our findings, and our recommendations. And then, of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. As Darrell, Mr. Walker alluded to, probably the most important part of our assessment was meeting with the working group just to find out what the concerns were at the school, what environmental issues there were, what health concerns people have, to sort of shape our assessment and make sure we address the concerns that people had with the school. And I think it was a fruitful meeting, probably mostly because the working group was very forthcoming, provided excellent information, and was patient with us in sort of describing the situation at the school. I think our objective for the assessment was sort of shaped by that meeting. We wanted to address the health concerns, and we wanted to address the health concerns that might be related to environmental exposures, but I can say from having done more than 30 years of work in indoor air quality that it is very, very difficult to to establish a causal relationship between exposures in a building and symptoms, and that really was not our objective. Our objective, because that is so difficult, even with exhaustive epidemiologic work, our objective was more to identify conditions that might be causing health-related concerns and make any recommendations we could to improve indoor air quality in the building, to make the building more healthy, a healthier indoor environment, safer indoor environment, and a more comfortable indoor environment. So with that said, our scope of work involved probably as important as anything in our investigative work was a simple walkthrough inspection of the building. There were a lot of concerns about mold exposure, some people with allergies, with diagnosed allergies to mold. There were concerns about excessive moisture, which is what causes mold to grow indoors. There were concerns about odors from mold and just general cleanliness in the building. We conducted a walkthrough inspection of representative classrooms in each wing of the building, of the permanent buildings. We inspected heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems. We had staff from the school system accompany us on the assessment, and they took these units apart so that we could do inspections inside the unit, look at the condition of the unit, the various components of the unit, the operation of the unit, and collect samples for mold, for identification of mold growth inside the units where that was necessary. We set up indoor air quality monitors to data log temperature, relative humidity, and carbon dioxide concentrations in 3 representative classrooms in 3 wings of the school. We did collect fungal bulk samples for identification of mold growth in the school in various places. And on a separate day, we inspected boilers in the school and conducted carbon monoxide monitoring to make sure that there were no combustion gas leaks inside the building. Our findings were generally that on the date of our inspections, the buildings were generally very clean and well maintained. We did not see any evidence of roof leaks or moisture problems that would cause mold to grow in the general environment, on books, on furnishings, on walls that you often see when you have moisture problems indoors. Mold control indoors is controlled by moisture control. And if moisture is properly controlled in the indoor environment, it won't grow in the indoor environment. And that's sort of the benchmark we look at, is moisture being controlled adequately so that mold won't grow in the indoor environment. Mold grows everywhere. It grows outdoors. We're constantly exposed to it, and we don't want amplification of mold in the indoor environment. And that's essentially what we were looking for. So in general, we didn't see mold in the general indoor environment. Now, when we looked at heating and air conditioning units, particularly in the 3 100 wings of the school, we did find that there appeared to be chronic moisture problems in what are called CRAC HVAC units. CRAC is just sort of an acronym for classroom air conditioning units in those 3 wings of the school building. There have been chronic water leaks in those units. We found evidence of mold growth. We identified mold growth from sampling, from tape lift samples. We were told before we did our assessment that a contractor had been hired to clean those units at the beginning of the 2017 school year, and that cleaning was evident. But we also know from having done this work and worked with these types of units that any heating and air conditioning system is very difficult to clean when mold and when moisture problems occur inside the unit and mold starts growing on various surfaces inside the unit. So I would say the cleaning that was done very well, but it's extraordinarily difficult to clean units like those in the school that have had chronic moisture problems like those have. Those CRAC cooling units also do not provide outdoor air ventilation, or don't provide for any means of mechanical outdoor ventilation. There's radiant heat in those classrooms, and the only means of getting outdoor air ventilation into the building into those classrooms is by operable windows, which are available in the classrooms. A lack of outdoor air ventilation isn't necessarily hazardous, but it makes a space, particularly a crowded space, stuffy and uncomfortable and odorous, particularly during towards the end of the day. We did find that we were told that carpet had been removed from a number of classrooms that had been water damaged. We saw carpet in just a few places. The media center is wall-to-wall carpet, but in classrooms we didn't see much carpet, either throw rugs or carpet. And carpet, anyone that has allergies know that carpet is both a sink for allergens, a place where allergens hide and settle in a space, and they're also a growth substrate. When there's adequate moisture, they're also a growth substrate for dust mites and mold. So we think it was favorable that we didn't see much carpet in the classrooms, and that was one of our recommendations, in fact, is to maintain that and to avoid the use of carpet in the classrooms where possible. Our recommendations for the school board and for the maintenance department are to replace the CRAC cooling units if resources allow. The units are probably more than 2 decades old. They've had extensive water damage over the years. There is mold growth in them. We can find mold growth in almost any cooling unit, but there's a lot in these units, and it's very difficult to clean. If they're not replaced, we'd recommend replacing the insulation inside the units and annual cleaning of those units, which is going to be difficult and certainly not as beneficial as replacement. The other benefit to replacement of those units would be that you could put in units that would allow for mechanical provision of outdoor air ventilation, treated outdoor air, rather than just opening a window and allowing cold or humid air to blow into a classroom. So we see sort of 2 benefits from doing that. But it is not an inexpensive or a simple solution, but it is one that we did put in our report. Again, we recommended limiting the use of throw rugs or carpets in the classrooms. And some of the air handling systems in other parts of the school have adjustable outdoor air ventilation rates. Those can be modified to increase outdoor air ventilation, and we did because based on our monitoring, we saw some deficits of outdoor air ventilation in other parts of the building, and would recommend that those ventilation rates be sort of adjusted or at least looked at and considered for adjustment, particularly in the more crowded spaces. The staff at the school, we also made recommendations for staff and teachers not to load the staff up with more responsibility, but they've done a really good job of pushing this issue and being diligent about identifying problems like roof leaks and reporting them. The maintenance system has a nice reporting system that I've not seen before that I think is really nice system for the staff to report in a spreadsheet maintenance problems to the maintenance staff. They've done a good job with that, and teachers are in those classrooms every day. If there's a roof leak, they're going to be the first ones to notice it, and they need to remain diligent in notifying maintenance to get out there and get those things fixed. There are also some recommendations, like I saw a few furry animals. Anybody that has kids with asthma or allergies know that sometimes those little furry critters can trigger asthma attacks or cause allergy problems, so we recommended removing some of those. Aerosol sprays and deodorant. We saw a few air fresheners, probably because the rooms are stuffy and odorous, because of a lack of outdoor air ventilation. Some of the teachers were using those to try to improve things. That really just adds to the indoor air contaminant load and is generally not recommended. But we did, I think the teachers have done a good job of being involved. I think they've driven a lot of this effort to sort of improve indoor air quality. I think it's clear there have been a lot of improvements at the school, and I think in general, the school is in very good shape, with the exception of a few problems we found with those, and for example, with those HVAC systems. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Ms. Munsinger.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What I would like you to talk a little bit about, because people are very concerned whenever issues of health for both teachers and students comes up, what are the health risks from mold, and what are the dangers that mold present to our staff and our children?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Mold fungal growth is everywhere in the environment. It's a decay organism. It's what decays leaves outside. We're exposed to it all the time. You can find fungal spores. You could culture fungal growth spores from pretty much any surface in any building, and we're all exposed to it continuously. Most of us do pretty well with mold exposure, aerosolized by breathing in mold exposure, but there is a subset of the population, a small portion, that have allergies, and allergies to different degrees to respiratory allergens like mold. And when they breed mold spores or vegetative cells, they have respiratory tract inflammation, a histamine reaction, and it causes breathing problems. Basically hay fever type symptoms, allergy type symptoms. So for most people, it's an allergen. It causes respiratory allergies. For people with asthma, it can exacerbate asthma or cause asthma attacks. It can be very serious for people. Some people that are exquisitely allergic to this stuff, and some of us simply are not. As I said, we're always exposed to mold in the indoor and outdoor environment. What we try to do in the indoor environment, we don't have standards for how much mold there should be in the air in an indoor environment. Our standard is that moisture should be controlled indoors, and this is true at home and in schools and any building. Moisture should be controlled indoors so that mold does not grow indoors.
So like air conditioning.
Exactly. In air conditioning, it can be caused by roof leaks. When you see the fuzzy stuff on a ceiling tile, that's because there was a roof leak, there was excessive moisture. The mold spores that were sitting there and waiting for the moisture, they grew when the moisture conditions were adequate to allow them to grow. And getting back to your health question, those mold spores, they reproduce by sending their spores, their vegetative reproductive cells into ambient air, and we get exposed when we breathe those spores and cells in, and that's what causes allergies.
And the one other question, again, because it's children, and we've had teachers who have complained for a period of time, are there long-term bad health outcomes for somebody who has been bothered by this, or once they're no longer exposed or the number of spores goes down, they will go back to their basic?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
That is the case.
Because that's really important for kids in particular.
That is a very important point, is that once someone is removed from the exposure, it's an acute, what we would call an acute health risk. That is, you realize symptoms when you're exposed. It's not a long-term health risk. Right. Other than that, it's not good to have chronic sinusitis, chronic breathing problems, chronic asthma attacks that go on and on and on. But generally, when someone is removed from exposure, the health symptoms improve.
So it's just like the allergies I get in the spring.
It's precisely that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
This is probably the $64,000 question that I'm going to ask you.
Hope I can answer it.
Do you feel like that if we were able to replace the crack pipe that you're talking about, and we were able to do our maintenance cleaning, do you feel like that would eliminate the problem that we have now?
You know, I wish I could say that it would. What I can say for sure is it will improve conditions, and I think people that have allergies will have less exposure to allergens. I think they will do better. I cannot promise that it will solve everybody's problems in that school. Honestly, you can, if you do surveys, you can find a proportion of people in any building that attribute illnesses and symptoms they have to the building-related illness or symptoms. And it's not always the case. Sometimes it is, but not everybody is going to be happy with, not everybody is going to feel like all their symptoms or all their illnesses have resolved as a result of following our recommendations even to the letter. I think it will make conditions better. We've tried to identify every sort of rational corrective measure that is doable, that will have a significant impact, but there's always, you know, there's always more that could be done, and there's, and no, you really can't. And like I said, I can find mold in any air handler pretty much. I've looked at enough of them. I can find it almost any air handling system, and I can find it indoors in almost any building, in other places.
And another thing, as far as doing something like this, you know, you said it's very expensive, and I'm assured it's very expensive. When we look at doing something like this, can you just give us any type of approximate cost? Or
I'm not in that business. I'm afraid I can't. I don't know if there's someone else here that could, but I'm afraid I can't.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions, and if not, I think we have, and thank you so much for your report, for meeting with us earlier, and with the work group from Ashley, so I know that they appreciate the time that you took with them as well. So board, I know that we've received the report as well, but since we've been in committee meetings all afternoon, and I believe we have some 50 pages, we need some time to look at those recommendations and process. I will say that from conversations that took place earlier, I think that for myself, and we can talk about this a little bit later when we talk about setting up another meeting, but what information we may need to get, just like you said, Ms. Calvert-Hayes, what are pricing and that sort of thing that we would need to talk to Dr. Emery and staff about at that time. So if there's no other questions at this time on the report itself, again, the report is loaded onto our school system website, and the quick links is the first thing on the left-hand side, so that you can go view it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will have our Building and Grounds Committee report.
Okay, this was a really, really short one, and we're not talking about sewers tonight for the first time in a long time. What we will be talking about is the traffic flow on Northwest Boulevard, and we will be voting tonight for approving that, improving the traffic flow on Northwest Boulevard. If you've been down there, you know it's a mess, and we have Wiley School and R.J. Reynolds there. So that will be up for vote tonight. We'll also be voting on the purchase of property at 1115 Louisville Vienna Road, and that'll include grading, paving, fencing, sidewalks, landscaping, and shelter canopy. So that's all we had for buildings and grounds, and we will be voting on that tonight.
Thank you. Next, our Policy Committee report.
Madam Chairman, the Policy Committee met this afternoon, and we had a discussion around the proposed policy 4118, which deals with our teacher contracts and the fact that the state legislature has given us the ability now to offer 1 year, 3 and 4 year contracts. As of right now, the general discussion was to go ahead and carry this to another reading this evening, and to come back after the policy had been enacted so that we'd be able to review the policy and how it impacted contracts, both 1 year and 4 year contracts, so that we could make sure that what we had put in place was both beneficial for our teachers and fair. So tonight, we will be looking at, under action items, approval of the 4118 teacher contracts and the policy 8120 school naming responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singletary. Curriculum Committee report?
Yes, we had a meeting last week, and we heard from several leaders in the district about updated standards for English, language arts, and math. We heard from our math and English language arts head honchos about how we had several teachers from our district who have given input to how standards could be tweaked and improved to help teachers imagine how those standards might come to life in their teachings in the room. So every year, every 5 years, we have to update standards. And so, you know, I was glad to hear that several of our teachers were involved in that improvement process. These new standards will come into being this next coming year, but the students won't be tested on it until spring of 2019. 2018, 2019. I'm sorry, 2019, 2020 year. So we've got a year. So then we also heard from our personalized learning coordinator, Brittany, about changes in the K through 2 report card. We have piloted this change from the standard report card that we've used in kindergarten, first and second grade. We piloted this change in several schools in our district, and we were able to hear in curriculum from a couple of those leaders in those schools. And it's going to look like a more involved, detailed report card so that parents and teachers alike can understand where children are in the learning process of different standards that they are to meet during the year. It helps teachers paint the picture of how parents can help their children through the process of education. We heard that teachers like it and parents understand it and like it, and it presents a more clear and specific tools to help both parents and teachers in the process. So that's for K through 2, change in the report card. And then we also got an update on our district Discovery Ed usage. We have some data that shows us where, in what classrooms, in what buildings, what teachers are using the Discovery Ed resources, lots, and we are hearing that they like the resources and that students are engaged where the usage is high. And we have some good usage in pockets, but we have work to do. So, good meeting.
Thank you. So next, board, we can have some discussion around our next scheduled board meeting would be May the 22nd. And so I think from concerns we have heard from Ashley and trying to find some remedy and as we read the report and take action on that. And also we heard also some more additional work on our budget. We could add in an earlier meeting than May the 22nd. And we normally hold our Tuesdays. We have a lot of activity on Tuesdays, so I believe we were looking at May the 1st. I think we have, for 3 board members, maybe some grievance hearings that evening. So conversations, if you are available that evening, and maybe us securing a time so that those hearings can happen, and then we can come right back here in this meeting and just in this space and have a abbreviated meeting for the 1st of May. So time, Dr. Emery, about when we should meet, or time, Dion, about how long it's going to take maybe?
So we sort of caucused about the grievance panel, and we added time to, so as you all know of serving on the grievance panel, our time we think we're going to end is usually not. So if we say realistically we might end at 7, our thinking was to be safe, because I think I'm hearing you say come back here for reasons of transparency. Absolutely. And the community, we would want to televise it. I think 7:30 is a really, well, we can't tell people sitting over there for a grievance that we can't hear it. So I think adding a half an hour to what we think is reasonable, if that's not too late for you, and again, we're talking an abbreviated agenda. I know, talking to Wayne in between and Darrell, we can certainly turn costs around pretty quickly, so you can look at those in advance of next week. I mean, we're talking a week from tonight, but get you some cost breakdowns. I don't think that will be problematic at all. And then if you have questions, certainly we can discuss, but we can get those ahead of time too if you have them.
So, board members, we're looking at May the 1st at 7:30. We'll be here.
And that sounds great, and my only concern is making sure that there's some kind of dinner available for those who are on grievance hearings. I'm not on grievance hearings, so I'm looking out for my fellow board members. But if whoever it is could please make sure there's some dinner for them between their hearings and the meeting.
So what we might do, Alex, is ask Brenda to set that up over there, and then anybody from here who might want to stop this. I mean, I hate to set it up in two places, but if we set something up in the other building, and then anybody from here who wants to stop in on the way here, then we take care of everybody that way.
Okay. Also, I think this is a perfect time if we have some questions now outside of the cost factor of what does that look like. I think we could share that now, or point person. Is that you, Dr. Emery, for questions? So I myself heard, I think from our committee, and questions from the work group and from the community, that yes, what's the cost of replacing those units? What does that look like time-wise to happen? But also the roof. There were mentions of roof leaks, and so what's the shape of the roof, and is that something that needs to be replaced, or maybe what has been replaced? And then also just the overall, what's the maintenance of the unit? What will that look? We heard that most of the units, filters and things like that are changed every 3 months, but is that adequate? Do we need to do something different? And the overall, so we continue to hear about moisture in the building and the mold. So what's our maintenance plan for the overall building, and what will that look like different? I seem to have detected that it was said that maybe the maintenance had not been kept up the way it should have been there. And so what will be a new plan moving forward? So it's not just, I think Will talked about it, it's a continuous process to make sure that you keep the building in the best standard. So if we could, and we may need a little bit more time long term, but what would that look like? Because I do believe that we owe them some answers on the first. So those are questions I have, board members, if you have other things, or if you want to send them to Dr. Emery.
And most of the questions that I had was exactly what I had written down. With one addition, what is the turnover when someone reports that they see a leak? How fast are we responding to any kind of reports that are being made? What is the report time? What is our response time to the reports being made? My main focus right now, I want to see the prices on the cost of replacement. That's my main focus.
And I would be interested, I don't know if they do this or not, but I would certainly want to know these crack pipes, what kind of warranty we get.
In 2 years.
Yeah,
Probably 2 years.
just 2 years. It is crack pipes, y'all. I was kind of, but that's what it is. It blew me away too.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman, I think Ms. Calvert is meaning to say a crack unit, which basically stands for classroom air conditioning system.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But that pipe's hooked on too.
Sorry, Lida. Sorry, Lida. I wanted to help you out there.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll go with the pipe any day.
Do we have other comments we need to make on the meeting for May the 1st? If not, we're going to move on. Okay, we're moving on.
Madam Chair, if I could just ask, so this gives us a great start and we can get out the gate ASAP, but in order for us to get this back to you, if you have other items, it would help if we said maybe end of day Thursday.
Okay.
And I know you need to look at the report. There may
Yes.
be things that come out of the report, and that doesn't mean, I mean, today we brought you stuff that we just finished this afternoon, so we will do our best to meet that, but I know you'd like to look at that ahead of the first. And so
Yes.
anything else that you would send my way, we'll try to get you something well in advance, like Friday, so you've got the weekend and an opportunity to look at it.
Okay. So that's reasonable. Thank you for giving those timelines. So that concludes our discussion items this evening. We'll move on to our action items. First would be to consider approval of the budget amendment number 5 and transfer number 5. Do I have a motion to approve? Second. Vice Chairman Barr, second. Mr. Johnson, any discussion or questions? All in favor? Motion carries. Consider approval of the GMP for Northwest Boulevard traffic improvements. Do I have a motion to approve? Mr. Johnson, do I have a second? Second. Ms. Motzinger, Ms. Calvert-Hayes, you're not voting, you're abstaining? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Consider approval to purchase property at 1115 Louisville, Vienna Road. Do I have a motion to approve? So moved. Ms. Motzinger, do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Taylor, any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Everyone vote on that, on the property purchase? Motion carries? Okay. Next, consider approval of policy 4118, teacher contracts. Do I have a motion to approve? Mr. Singletary, do I have a second? Ms. Calvert-Hayes, do we have any comments or discussion?
I do. I do have one more inquiry that I want to find out. I know I've been on this teacher contract with the fine tooth. My last question, under the 4-year contracts, the criterion on number 4, it says the artifacts mutually agreed upon the evaluator as evidence for growth. That is for the teachers or the staff that does not give an EVOS data. So when it comes to school counselors and social workers, just out of curiosity, what are some of the artifacts that we're looking for from them that will show growth? That'll help me a bunch if anyone can answer that. What are some of the things that can be agreed on? What are the artifacts we're looking for that they can prove growth so that they can maintain a 4-year contract?
And I think some of that is we're gonna have to be to the point of what does it look like in the first year? How do we be fair in those situations where people may not have absolute direct contact with kids? So for example, the counselors have a measure document, so I think they have guidance in ways that they can collect student data. They also have more direct contact with students.
Okay.
So in elementary, I may be doing classroom guidance. I may have, in my mind, I would see a counselor saying, I have maybe 20 students that are my high flyers, and my goal was to try to see, not see them as much. I mean, so are they being referred for discipline for some kind of plan or counseling, and be able to show that I was able to have impact in those students. I think those, as we have folks who move away from that direct student contact, we're going to have to be flexible about measures. I know, so our social workers keep track of contacts and how they've helped families, and so we may have to make leaps that if we help families with housing, so I have a caseload and I've helped 50% of my caseload with secure housing, that impacts student growth. And that's where I think the training with administrators, Ms. Gainey's already found some dollars from this year that are unused that we can use, because that came up last discussion, is how do we make sure folks are really on the same page and consistent. And I think this factor also means we need to be clear and give our administrators some guidance in how do we create these mutually agreeable.
Right.
And I think we go back to those groups themselves. I mean, I'm sure Rhonda could probably tell us ways that she, as a social, and so some of those things that we got from teachers in the feedback on the policy, to me, are great ideas for how we could do this. So I think going to those groups and saying, what would that be, are important. In this first year, I think we're going to have to, we're going to have to be very flexible in that.
Okay. And I'm okay with that, as long as it is mutually agreed, because, you know.
And that's why we put the word
Yeah, I was
mutually
gonna
in
say,
there.
as long as we keep it.
It can't be that one person decides between now and June, this is what growth looks like. There has to be some agreement on that.
Okay.
Based on that, now I'm a little bit concerned from a policy perspective on whether or not we need this cleared up just a little bit.
I think the other piece to that was that, I think, Ms. Taylor, you had brought up, when we discussed this earlier tonight in policy, around just making sure that we were mindful of circling back with an evaluation of, and so, how many contracts, how many 4-year contracts were awarded, and to go through that process. And so we need to do that and follow up on that, at some point, so that we can see what that looks like.
The other suggestion I would offer to that is that we could, as we get into the weeds on it, we could create an AR, which, if you pass the policy, it allows us to get moving on contracts, but an AR that would address some of these things that have come up, and then there's a sort of consistent game plan for everybody that might be helpful. That would be another way of addressing that too.
Dr. Emery, when do you think that could happen? What are your windows?
Well, part of getting the policy passed is then we have the criteria for looking at the big picture, and when we start doing that, it gives us a platform for, is this an issue or not? So I don't know if, because guidance counselors, a lot of them have advanced degrees, are they tenured already? So are we talking about 5 people? Are we talking, and I think getting this passed allows us to process that out and see, when we have such a large number of our staff that are already career status, we're talking about that 50% that we have to factor this in. I think that would help us, once we got that done, that would help us look at ARs. We have to issue new contracts for people in June.
Right. Okay.
So we're not talking a long
Not
turnaround
long
time.
Okay. Do other comments or questions, Marilyn?
And maybe one thing to do during that time, I know that we surveyed and got a lot of really good feedback and responses on the teacher contract. We may narrow that field to just those areas that we really need to look on it at and see what is mutually agreeable between the, administrators and the counselors, social workers. I think that was really helpful to me to bring some clarity to this policy. So I think that would be really a good way to probably do an AR. And that could come with time. They can go ahead, like you say, contracts have to be awarded now, but you've got a year to kind of fine tune that.
Yeah, I thank you. We're pioneering here a little bit, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. I really appreciate the response we've had from our teachers has been remarkable and resoundingly supportive, and so I think we need to be sure we include them in where this goes, so that we keep that good rapport, I think, that's been established here. So
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Next, consider approval of policy 8120, school naming responsibility. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Singletary, do I have a second? Ms. Clark, any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Next, we will add to our action item that we will have a public meeting for the Board of Education here in the auditorium on May the 1st, starting at 7:30. Do I have a motion? Mr. Barr, second. Ms. Taylor, all in favor? Wonderful, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I will not be around for that meeting date, but I will put my input and then read and give you my input prior to that meeting, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ms. Parker.
Thank you.
Also, I think we have talked about an additional meeting. We want to make sure that we publicly say that the meeting that was on our long agenda list for May the 8th has been canceled. So our meetings for May will now be May the 1st at 7:30 and May the 22nd at 6:30. So that concludes our action items this evening. We have 2 items on our consent agenda: approval of the meeting minutes for the April 10th, 2018 meeting and approval of the general personnel report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Mr. Singletary, second. Ms. Taylor, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we will open up the floor for public comments. I have one person signed up.
Thank you for joining us on Your School Channel, Cable 2.